TIFU by accidentally taking my girlfriend's dad to a furry convention. Let me start by saying this was not how I imagined impressing my girlfriend's family. So I, 27M, have been dating this amazing girl, Anna, 25F, for about a year and a half. We're serious. We live together, we talk about the future, all that good stuff. Naturally, it was time for me to meet the full family, including her dad, Rick, 58M, who lives out of state. Anna's mom passed away a few years ago, so Rick is very protective and particular about who his daughter brings home. Now, I'd already met Rick briefly on FaceTime and during a holiday dinner over Zoom, and we got along fine. He's a bit of a gruff guy, ex-Marine, old school but not mean, just very no-nonsense. Anna told me he loves cars, meat, and classic rock. Easy enough. So when Rick came to visit us last month, I really wanted to bond. We already had a big family dinner planned for Sunday, but I figured Saturday would be the perfect time for some guy time. You know, do something together to show I'm serious about Anna, maybe earn some of that elusive, you have my blessing energy. Here's where things go horribly, horribly wrong. I remembered a car show was happening that weekend in the city. I'd seen a flyer weeks ago at a gas station near my gym, advertising the wildest, most colorful automotive event of the year. Perfect, I thought. Rick loves cars, I love quirky stuff. This'll be fun. Now, the flyer didn't have many details. It just had the date, time, and venue, some big event center I'd never been to. I looked it up online quickly and saw an event called Furry Fury 2025. In my head, I assumed this was the name of the car show. You know, because people name car events weird things. Plus, the description mentioned custom designs, costumes, contests, high-octane fun. Sounded like a themed car convention. Maybe like a Mad Max cosplay car thing? So, I bought 2 tickets. I didn't tell Rick much except, I got us passes to this wild car show, you're gonna love it. He was game. I pick him up Saturday morning. He's wearing his leather jacket and aviators, ready to see some muscle cars and maybe talk shop with other gearheads. We get there, park, walk into the convention hall, and immediately I know something's off. First, there are no cars. Second, we're surrounded by furries. Full-on head-to-toe, furry suits. Foxes. Wolves. Dragons. A horse with LED eyes and abs. And more tails than I was mentally prepared for. Rick stops dead in his tracks. I swear to God. He narrows his eyes and says, "What the hell is this?" I'm still holding on to some hope at this point. Maybe there's still a car exhibit somewhere inside. Maybe this is just the costume portion. I try to play it cool, like, maybe it's an entrance thing. Let's look around. We walk further in. Now we're being greeted by a giant raccoon offering us a map. Rick takes the map and just stares at it. I look over his shoulder. There's a snuggle zone. A hell-off arena. Panels like fursuiting for fitness and consent and tail etiquette. No mention of cars. Not one. Then it hits me. Furry Fury is not a car show. It's a full-blown furry convention. I have brought my girlfriend's very traditional ex-Marine father to a furry con. On purpose. Now, I should have just admitted my mistake and gotten us out of there immediately. But in my panicked brain, I thought maybe if we just walked around quickly, I could pretend it was a quirky art festival or something. You know, salvage the moment. Nope. Rick, to his credit, did not lose his temper. Instead, he just shut down emotionally in the way only a retired Marine can. He walked stiffly, silently, as we passed a kangaroo doing something suspiciously rhythmic with a tail and a squeaky toy. We tried to veer away, but ended up walking right through a dance-off happening between what I later learned were 2 protogen fursuiters. One of them tried to high-five Rick. Rick didn't break stride, didn't acknowledge him. Just a slow, steady walk of inner death. I finally muttered, "I think I messed this up." He says, without looking at me, "This is not a car show." No, it's not. We made it back to the exit in a haze of confusion, glitter, and more synthetic fur than a Build-A-Bear factory. We didn't talk the whole ride home. The silence was crushing. Later, at dinner, Anna asked how the show went. Rick gave me a long look before saying, "It was an interesting experience." Then he excused himself to go outside and chop wood. We don't even have a fireplace. I had to come clean. I told Anna everything. She burst out laughing and then immediately apologized for laughing. But she couldn't stop. Her dad didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. Sunday morning, he left earlier than planned. As he was heading out the door, he shook my hand and said, "Son, I don't know what kind of kinks you and my daughter are into, but I don't need to know. I've never wanted to crawl into a hole more in my life." It's been 3 weeks. Rick hasn't answered any of my texts. Anna says he'll come around eventually, but I'm now forever the guy who dragged him into a fur pile. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me, or if he's currently writing his own TIFU post titled, "TIFU by agreeing to hang out with my daughter's degenerate boyfriend." Moral of the story: always read the full event description before buying tickets. Especially when the word fury is spelled with 2 R's. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by deciding that after the chaos of my last breakup and a rough stretch at work, what I really needed was a silent retreat. Let me preface this by saying, I'm not spiritual. I don't meditate. My usual idea of silence is falling asleep in front of a Netflix documentary with my phone on Do Not Disturb. But my friend Claire swore by this 5-day silent retreat she did last year, came back glowing like she'd been on vacation in Narnia. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Inner peace. Minimal human interaction. Maybe I'll finally learn to sit still for more than 5 minutes. Spoiler: I did not find inner peace. I found something much worse. So this place is a legit monastery up in the mountains, run by monks who've taken vows of silence. No phones, no talking, no gestures that could be interpreted as talking. Meals in silence. Walking meditations in silence. You even get assigned a room with no locks or keys because apparently attachment to property is discouraged. Sounds weird, right? But I was weirdly into it. The first day is fine. A little boring. A lot of sitting, breathing, and trying to figure out if I'm doing it right without asking anyone anything. On day 2, during the silent group breakfast, I noticed this woman sitting diagonally across from me. I'll call her Megan. Megan has the kind of presence you notice, even in silence. Elegant posture. Intense eyes. Hair tied back in a way that makes her look like a tragic poet. And I swear, during a tea break, our eyes met and held for like 4 full seconds. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I didn't. By day 3, there's a pattern. I go for a walk. She's there. I sit in the library area with my book on mindfulness. She's 2 cushions away. During the walking meditation, our steps sync up, completely by accident, and neither of us adjusts. That's how starved for human connection I was. Synchronized pacing made my heart skip a beat. Now, remember, we can't talk. Not even a whisper. So all this tension builds up in absolute silence, which only makes it stronger. I'm crafting this whole narrative in my head like a teenager. Maybe we're both escaping something. Maybe fate brought us here to meet in this monastery. Maybe silence is our love language. By day 4, I'm fully gone. We make eye contact constantly. I start deliberately choosing seats where she might sit nearby. I even leave a poem, don't judge me, on the table in the reading room. Just a few lines about finding stillness in the presence of another. Didn't sign it. Figured she'd know. I go to bed imagining some kind of soul-level understanding passing between us, our unspoken connection transcending speech. In hindsight, barf. Day 5, the final day. We're allowed to speak again after breakfast. There's a ceremony where we gently reintroduce sound. I'm buzzing with anticipation. I know we'll talk. We'll laugh about how intense it all was. Maybe grab coffee on the way back down the mountain. Maybe we'll, God help me, I even thought about asking if she lived nearby. We break silence in the main hall. People murmur hellos, clear throats, exchange names. It's awkward, but in a wholesome way. I look for her. She's talking to one of the monks, smiling in a way that makes my stomach flip. I wait a bit, then walk over. She sees me and lights up. "Hi," I say, already smiling. And she says, "Oh my God, you're the guy from the app, right?" I blink. "What?" She laughs. "The mindfulness app. You look exactly like the guy in the deep stillness course. I spent the whole week trying to figure out if it was you." I try to recover. "No, sorry, that's not me." She tilts her head.
Huh.
"Well, anyway, I'm Megan." I say my name, still slightly stunned. We talk for a minute, and I realize she has no idea I was silently flirting with her all week. To her, I was just a vaguely familiar-looking dude who was around a lot. That would have been embarrassing enough. But then this man walks over. Mid-30s.
Tall.
Beard that screams Brooklyn craft coffee shop. He puts his arm around Megan's waist, smiles at me, and says, "Hey, babe, did you tell him about the poem?" I go cold. She laughs.
No.
"Okay, this is hilarious. He left me this note, like, this incredibly romantic poem. I thought it was from you at first, but the handwriting doesn't match." Beard man, let's call him Colin, leans in conspiratorially. "We think it was the monk who runs the meditation garden." I physically choke. They think a monk broke his vow of silence to write a love poem? And I'm standing there realizing I left anonymous verse that was intercepted by a married woman who now thinks she was being wooed by a celibate spiritual guide. They laugh again. I excuse myself to go pack. It gets worse. On my way out, I walk past the garden and see the monk they were talking about. Quiet guy, maybe in his 60s. Looks like he's never had a lustful thought in his life. He gives me a very calm, knowing nod. I panic and nod back, praying he doesn't think I'm confessing to anything. 2 days later, I get an email from the monastery. A general update to all attendees. Apparently, there's been a disruption in staff conduct, and one of the monks has temporarily stepped back from his duties. No name mentioned, but guess what? The meditation garden is now closed for refurbishment. I am 95% sure they confronted the monk. And since I left the poem unsigned, and the only clue was it appeared during meditation hours, they assumed it was him. Meaning, I may have accidentally gotten a monk fired, or at least suspended, by flirting with a married woman who didn't even know I was flirting. But wait. Still not over. 2 weeks later, Claire sends me a link. Megan and Colin have a couples wellness blog. Their most recent post is titled, "When Temptation Enters Sacred Space, A Lesson in Trust." It's vague, but not that vague. They talk about a silent retreat, a mysterious admirer, and the strength of marital communication. There's a quote from the poem, my poem, in Comic Sans. I have not written another poem since. I am terrified of monasteries. And I still lie awake sometimes thinking about the monk, sipping his tea, wondering why his life got turned upside down by a poem he never wrote. TIFU a few months ago, but the consequences are somehow still happening, so I feel like I've only just realized how deep I've gone. So I'm not a wine guy. At all. I drink whiskey when I'm sad, beer when I'm happy, and anything else when it's free. I'm the type to call red wine dry grape juice that burns, and I've used a corkscrew maybe twice in my life. Anyway, I matched with this woman, Lena, on a dating app. She's brilliant, witty, works in art curation, and her profile made it sound like she's a regular at wine tastings and jazz bars. She messages me first, already a win, and after a couple days of chatting, she suggests we meet in person at a wine bar downtown that has a name so French it feels like you have to smoke a cigarette just to pronounce it. Now, I panic. I've got 3 days until the date, and I don't want to be the guy asking for a red that tastes less like poison. So I go into cram mode like I'm about to take the SATs. I watch YouTube videos titled things like Wine Basics for Dummies and How to Not Look Like a Total Jackass at a Wine Tasting. I binge read wine vlogs, memorize grape varieties, learn the difference between a Syrah and a Shiraz, spoiler, same grape, different places, and even practice holding a glass by the stem to not warm the wine with my peasant hands. The night of the date arrives. I wear my cleanest button-up and meet Lena at this dimly lit temple of pretension. The waiter brings the wine list, more like a leather-bound novella, and hands it to me, because of course he does. I glance at Lena, who smiles and says, "You pick." Surprise me. Panic.
Sweat.
Internal screaming. But then, like a demon had possessed me, I start talking. And not just talking, asterisk describing star. I don't even know where the words came from, but I point to a bottle and say, "Let's go with the 2014 Chateauneuf du Pape. It's Grenache forward, good structure, and the tertiary notes should be opening up beautifully."
What?
The waiter raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised, but nods and walks off. Lena looks impressed. "Wow, you know your wine," she says, leaning forward. I nod modestly, like, well, I dabble, and try not to scream into the cheese board. Then things spiral. The sommelier comes over to pour. He does the whole ritual, pours a little into my glass for tasting. I'm supposed to sip, swirl, sniff, and nod like I've just tasted bottled enlightenment. Instead, I take a deep breath, sniff like I'm about to cry, sip, and then just go,
Yes.
Notes of leather, black cherry, and a bit of forest floor. Who the hell was speaking through me? The sommelier pauses. That's an impressive palate. Are you in the industry? I should have just said no. But Lena's looking at me like I'm the world's most interesting man, and I've never felt so powerful. So I say, used to be, worked as a consultant for a few cellars out west. His eyes light up. Would you mind meeting our head sommelier? He'd love to pick your brain. Before I can say absolutely not, I'm being introduced to Jean-Marc, a tiny French man with the world's most judgmental eyebrows. He starts quizzing me on vintages, regions, soil types. It's a wine-themed boss battle. I use everything I learned during my 72-hour binge study session and somehow survive. By the end, Jean-Marc is chuckling and nodding like he's found his long-lost cousin. He tells me if I'm ever looking for work, I should come by for a tasting and see if the palate still dances. I think I'm in the clear. Fast forward a week. Lena and I are still seeing each other. She tells her wine-loving friends about me, and suddenly I'm being invited to wine nights, asked to recommend bottles, and even added to a wine-tasting Facebook group. I've now had to continue studying wine just to maintain the lie. It's become a part-time job. But it gets worse. One of Lena's friends, a real sommelier at a local Michelin-starred spot, invites me to a staff blind tasting as a guest expert. I try to decline, but Lena's so excited for me, I can't. I spend 3 sleepless nights trying to prep, but it's not enough. At the tasting, I'm handed a glass and told nothing. I swirl, sniff, and sip like a man about to be executed. My brain blinks. The wine tastes red. Just red. I say, this is a bold Cabernet Sauvignon, likely New World, maybe Napa? There's some oak, hints of cassis, and a touch of graphite. The real sommelier blinks. That's a Barolo. From Piedmont. I nod slowly. Of course. I was testing your reactions. Laughter. Lots of it. But they think I'm joking. They love it. They think I'm some eccentric wine savant who makes deliberately wrong guesses to spark discussion. Suddenly, I'm a hit. They invite me back. And here's the kicker. They offer me a part-time sommelier position, just 2 nights a week. We like your energy, the manager says. You're unconventional. I take it.
Why?
Because I don't know how to say no anymore. I've now been pretending to be a wine expert for 3 months. I pour wine for rich people and whisper things like mid-palate elegance and subtle minerality, while praying no one calls me out. Lena still doesn't know I made the whole thing up. Every time I pour her a glass at home, she looks at me like I'm magic. I've read 5 textbooks on viticulture just to stay ahead of the curve. I have tasting journals. I own 3 decanters. I haven't even told my mom. She thinks I work in tech.
So yeah.
I guess I'm a sommelier now. Accidentally. And I still think red wine tastes like spicy sadness. TIFU by joining a Zoom meeting I thought was my job interview, but was actually a therapy group session for recovering kleptomaniacs. This happened last week, and I'm still dying inside every time I remember it. For context, I've been job hunting like crazy. I left a soul-sucking corporate job in February thinking I'd take a month off to decompress. Then that month turned into 2, then 3, and suddenly I was living off canned soup and vibes. So I applied everywhere.
Literally.
I must have sent out 60 resumes in a week. I applied to startups, nonprofits, even a goat yoga place that needed a digital brand ambassador. That's where I was mentally. Anyway, last Tuesday, I get an email that I was selected for a virtual group assessment for a client-facing role. The email was super vague. No company logo, just a woman named Janine B. and a Zoom link. Honestly, I didn't even remember applying to that job, but I assumed it was one of those group interviews some companies do to assess culture fit or whatever. So I put on my semi-formal Zoom outfit, blazer, button-up shirt, pajama pants, and log into the meeting a few minutes early. There are already 5 other people there, all with their cameras on, looking semi-serious. Everyone had those vague usernames like Teed Moore and David89. The host, Janine, was there too, smiling like someone who had just finished a 40-minute guided meditation. I assumed she was HR. Janine greeted me warmly. Hi, welcome. Feel free to get comfortable and grab some water. We'll begin shortly. Cool. Sounds professional enough. I mute myself and smile. Then she says, all right, everyone, let's begin. First, I want to thank you all for being here today and for continuing your commitment to this healing journey. It's not easy to confront these parts of ourselves, but this space is safe, and I appreciate your vulnerability. What? She continues, let's start with a quick grounding exercise. Feet flat on the floor, deep breath in. Now I'm wondering if I clicked the wrong Zoom link. I glance at the URL again. Nope, same one from the email. Maybe it's a mindfulness warm-up? Some companies do weird onboarding rituals, right? Then she says, as we begin today's session, I want to remind everyone of our confidentiality agreement. What's shared here stays here.
My palms are sweating now.
Before I can unmute and ask what the hell is going on, Janine says, let's start with reflections. Maybe someone can share a moment this week when they felt the urge to take something and how they managed that impulse.
Wait.
Take something? The first guy, T. Moore, jumps in. I had a really rough day at work on Thursday. Walked past the supply closet and saw those new iPads they got for the sales team. I swear my hand was on the doorknob, but I remembered what we talked about last week. I texted my accountability buddy instead. Janine, that's huge progress, Thomas. Thank you for sharing. That's when it hits me. I'm not in a group interview. I'm in a therapy group for kleptomaniacs. I panicked, but for some reason I didn't leave. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was the guilt of clicking leave meeting and making it obvious I didn't belong. Maybe I thought it'd be rude. Maybe deep down I was just a little curious. Either way, I stayed. I stayed. Like an idiot. Then Janine says, we've got a new face today. Would you like to introduce yourself? Everyone turns to look at me. Now, I could have said, oh, I'm so sorry. I think I joined the wrong meeting. But my lizard brain said, nope, time to lie your way out of this hellhole. So, I unmute. I say, hi, I'm Caleb. My name is not Caleb. Janine smiles. Welcome, Caleb. Would you like to tell us what brought you here? I blurted out the first thing I could think of. I had a problem with stealing back in college. Mostly dumb stuff. Textbooks. Cafeteria trays. Once the microscope. A microscope. I have no idea why that's what came out. Janine, bless her soul, nods. Thank you for your honesty. The college years can be difficult. What inspired you to seek support now? I say, I guess. I realized it was a pattern. Like I've been stealing time from people. From myself. And I want to stop. That got an audible from one guy, like I just said something profound. Another woman said, that really resonates. I could feel my soul leaving my body. The session went on for another 40 minutes. People shared stories, real, raw, emotional stuff. One woman talked about shoplifting lipstick from a Rite Aid during a depressive episode. Another guy said he stole USB chargers compulsively and had drawers full of them. I listened, nodded, Tried not to make any sudden moves. At one point, Janine said, "Caleb, would you like to share more about what you're hoping to gain from this group?" And I said, I don't want to be defined by my mistakes. I want to build something better." What was I saying? When the session ended, Janine said, "Caleb, I'll email you some resources and the workbook link." I nodded. She actually did. The email subject line was, "Welcome to the Klepto Recovery Circle." The moment I left the meeting, I screamed into a pillow for 10 minutes. Then I checked the original email again. I'd misread it. The subject was group interview session, but the sender address was from groupintervention.org. I'd applied to be a peer facilitator for mental health workshops. The interview wasn't until Thursday. This was just their weekly recovery session. I haven't responded to Janine's email. I don't know if I ever will. But I still think about Caleb sometimes. I hope he's doing okay. A few months ago, my best friend Chris asked me if he could list me as his emergency contact for something. I didn't think twice about it. We've been through thick and thin since college, roommates, road trips, the time we accidentally joined a cult seminar for free pizza.
Point is, I trusted him.
I figured it was something boring like a job application, gym membership, or doctor's office. All he said was, "It's just a formality. You probably won't ever get a call." He was wrong. It started last Thursday at 6:17 a.m. when my phone rang and jolted me awake. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but some gut instinct told me to answer. A calm but stern woman introduced herself as Detective Wallace from the Portland Police Department. She asked if I was James Blake. I said yes, and my stomach started doing somersaults. My first thought was, "Oh, God, Chris is dead." Thankfully, he wasn't. But in some ways, what came next was worse. She told me Chris had been arrested. For what? I asked, trying not to let the panic crawl into my voice. There was a long pause. Harboring a fugitive. Now, I've known Chris for 12 years. He once cried because he hit a squirrel with his car. He uses reusable grocery bags. He's the kind of guy who still brings wine to a dinner party. But harboring a fugitive? That sounded like he'd started living in a different Netflix category than I'd been prepared for. The detective asked me to come down to the station since I was listed as his emergency contact and secondary guarantor. That's the moment I realized I should have probably asked what kind of form I was signing. I hadn't signed anything explicitly, but apparently Chris had submitted some digital form that listed me as someone responsible for handling legal or medical issues in case of detainment. So, I drive to the station half awake and 100% confused. When I get there, they escort me into an interview room like I'm part of some gritty procedural. I meet Detective Wallace in person, impeccably dressed, sharp eyes, very serious. She asks me how well I know Chris. I tell her we've been friends for over a decade. Then she asks, "Do you know someone named Sasha R?"
Nope.
Never heard the name. Turns out Sasha R is a woman who'd been missing for 6 months and was the subject of a statewide investigation. Not presumed dead, but definitely hiding from someone or something. I'm sitting there thinking Chris must have stumbled into something by accident, like maybe he rented a room to a woman with a fake name.
But no.
Turns out Sasha had been living with him. Like, full on, sharing groceries, Netflix password, who gets the shower first type living. And this wasn't new. She'd been there for almost 5 months. Right under everyone's noses. Including mine. I'd been to his apartment during that time. I met her. I just didn't know I met her. She introduced herself as Emily. Said she was Chris's girlfriend. Super nice. A little quiet, but seemed cool. I remember making a dumb joke about how Chris finally stopped being married to his Xbox. Detective Wallace drops the bomb that Sasha/Emily had multiple warrants out, not for violent crimes, but for grand theft and identity fraud. Apparently, she'd stolen a high 6-figure amount from a boutique finance firm she worked for in California, then vanished. Chris, bless his idiot heart, didn't know who she really was. He met her through a dating app. She said she was taking a sabbatical from corporate burnout, and Chris, ever the bleeding heart, offered her a room when she said her sublet fell through. I guess he never questioned why she didn't have a job, a bank account, or any ID. She paid for things in cash was the only thing he offered as an explanation. The kicker? She was finally caught because she got into a screaming match with a bartender over a fake $100 bill. Cops ran her prints.
Boom.
Game over. But here's where I really screwed up. Because Chris listed me as a guarantor in the case of legal entanglements, they assumed I was either co-signer or accomplice. I spent the next 5 hours in a station getting questioned. They thought I might have known about Sasha's true identity, or worse, that I was part of her escape plan. I even had to show them my Venmo history to prove I wasn't laundering money. It didn't help that 2 months ago, Chris asked to borrow $2,000 to cover some bills while his job was transitioning. I gave it to him without a second thought. Apparently, some of that money might have been used by Sasha to buy fake documents. The detective said, "We're not accusing you of anything, but it's suspicious as hell." I wasn't allowed to leave until nearly 3 p.m. I hadn't eaten. I missed work.
My boss thought I'd been in a car crash or something.
I walked out of that station with the soul of a 90-year-old man who'd just witnessed every episode of Dateline in one sitting. Chris eventually got released because they determined he genuinely didn't know. But he's still being investigated for possible obstruction because he deleted messages between him and Sasha a few weeks ago when they broke up.
Why?
Because he was embarrassed and didn't want me or anyone else knowing it ended. So now the cops think he might have been covering for her. And me? I'm now on record in a police file. I had to call my bank to explain weird activity. I've got a formal warning from work about unexcused absence. I've probably aged 5 years. Chris tried to apologize. I told him he's no longer allowed to list me on any forms ever again. I also made him Zelle me the $2,000 back with a caption that reads, "Reimbursement for emotional trauma." I've since learned that being someone's emergency contact is more than just picking them up from the hospital. Apparently, it's also about picking up the pieces of their absolutely bonkers life choices. So yeah, TIFU by being too good a friend. TIFU by accidentally becoming a wedding crasher cult hero. So this happened last weekend, and I still have no idea how I got away with it. Some background. I, 29M, was invited to a wedding that took place at a huge estate-style venue outside of the city. It was a co-worker's wedding, not someone I know super well, but well enough that I got an invite. I almost didn't go because I barely knew anyone else attending and had a brutal week at work. But the invite promised an open bar and a sunset garden ceremony, so I figured, screw it, why not? Now here's the thing. I got the times mixed up. The invite said ceremony at 4 p.m., reception at 6, but in my fried brain, I read it as ceremony at 6. I show up around 5:45, dressed nice enough, but obviously late. The parking situation was chaos, and by the time I got to the actual event lawn, the ceremony was wrapping up. I figured I'd just sneak into the reception area and wait it out. But when I got there, I realized something was very, very wrong. First, I didn't recognize anyone. Like, not a single soul. No coworkers, no mutuals. Second, everything was just too fancy. Like, this was a seriously upscale wedding. Way above the budget of my coworker, who once cried in the office because her DoorDash order got canceled and she couldn't afford to reorder. Third, there were actual professional waiters in tuxedos circulating with what I can only describe as molecular gastronomy, hors d'oeuvres. I asked one of the waiters if this was the Hernandez Cooper wedding. He gave me a weird look and said, "No, this is the Bellamy Drayton wedding." I panicked a little. I'd walked into the wrong wedding. Now, any normal person would just leave. Maybe laugh it off, go find the correct venue, which was apparently in the other garden across the property.
But not me.
I had already been handed a glass of champagne and one of those tiny bite-sized crab things. I was starving and curious. So instead of bailing, I stayed. At first, I tried to blend in. Just another well-dressed guest among hundreds. But things took a weird turn when someone approached me and said, "You made it. We weren't sure you'd come after what happened in Tahoe." I had no idea what happened in Tahoe, but I just laughed and said, "Yeah, well, you know how it is." The guy laughed, clapped me on the back, and offered me a cigar. Suddenly, I'm standing in a circle of guys in suits, puffing Cubans and making up stories about a fictional trip to Tahoe. Apparently, I was Derek's friend from college, and people kept telling me how much they'd heard about me. One guy even said, "You're the reason Derek survived junior year," which made no sense, but I just went with it. Then came the toasts. They called up Derek's groomsmen to give speeches. I stayed seated, sipping my drink, when one of the groomsmen leaned over and said, "Hey, did you write your speech?" My brain did the math. They thought I was one of the groomsmen. I should have cleared it up. I should have said, "Hey man, I think you've got me confused with someone else."
But no.
I stood up, walked to the mic, and gave a speech. Off the cuff. In front of like 200 people. I have no idea where it came from. I talked about friendship, about loyalty, about how Derek once took the fall for me in college, and how that defined the man he is today. I quoted The Office. I toasted to the love that makes us better people. I got a standing ovation. The bride was crying. Derek, the actual groom, who I'd never met before in my life, hugged me and said, "I freaking love you, man." The rest of the night became a blur. People wanted selfies with me. Someone's mom asked if I was single. The DJ gave me a shout-out. I was handed the microphone again during the dancing and led a group in singing Mr. Brightside. I was, somehow, the life of this incredibly upscale wedding where I didn't know a single person. Around midnight, as things started winding down, I slipped away, ghosted Houdini style, just disappeared into the night before someone figured it out. On my way out, I passed by the actual Hernandez Cooper wedding, which looked like a high school reunion at a public park in comparison. I didn't even stop in. I just kept walking to my car and drove home in complete silence, stunned. On Monday, I saw my coworker and apologized for missing her wedding. Claimed I had car trouble and didn't want to cause a scene showing up late. She was super chill about it and told me I didn't miss much. But here's the kicker. Today, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph of me and Derek, arm in arm, cigars in our mouths, looking like lifelong brothers. On the back it said, "To the real MVP. Tahoe forever." I have no idea who sent it. So, a couple months ago, I, 27M, started dating this girl named Kelsey, 26F, who I met through a mutual friend at trivia night. She's smart, gorgeous, sarcastic in the best way, and just strange enough to keep me on my toes. On our third date, over Thai food and drinks, she tells me she works as a mortician. Like, full-on, embalming bodies, preparing funerals, grief counseling, the whole 9 yards. Now, I'm not squeamish, but I wasn't exactly expecting to hear that while slurping pad thai. I made some dumb joke like, "Guess that job's really dead-end," and she didn't even blink, just hit me with, "Wow. Haven't heard that one before," and kept eating. Cool as hell. Anyway, over the next few weeks, I get more into her, and as we talk about work, I do boring tech support from home. She keeps mentioning how passionate she is about death care and how misunderstood it is. I start to feel like my job is a little lame in comparison. She's dealing with the weight of human existence, and I'm arguing with boomers about their routers. So I get this idea in my head. What if I did something bold to show her I care? Something weird. Something mortuary-related. Cue my brain thinking. What if I got a part-time job at a funeral home? As a surprise. To show I understand her world. Yes, I know how dumb that sounds now. So I apply at this small, family-owned funeral home across town. The owner, Ron, is this leathery dude in his 60s who looks like he's halfway to being embalmed himself. He's surprisingly chill and hires me on the spot because I said I was looking for meaningful work and interested in the industry. He doesn't ask too many questions, and within days, I'm working 3 evenings a week doing minor stuff, parking lot duty, setting up chairs, cleaning up after services, even wheeling caskets around occasionally. At first, it's kind of cool in a morbid way. Quiet.
Structured.
I weirdly like the calm. I don't tell Kelsey yet. I want to wait for the perfect moment to reveal it, like I'm some corpse-loving Clark Kent. But then, one night, Ron says he needs me to help out with a difficult family the next day. It's a big Catholic funeral, lots of people flying in. Apparently the deceased was a matriarch type, grandmother of 8, bridge club legend, etc. My job is simple. Be respectful, Stay out of the way, and for the love of God, don't mess with the casket once it's set.
Easy.
The morning of the funeral, Ron is already stressed. The weather's crap, the family is massive and loud, and we're short-staffed. He has me help set the room, then leaves me to greet people while he handles some family politics. I'm trying my best to be invisible when this woman, maybe in her 50s, lots of jewelry, power haircut, storms up to me and demands to see the body. I tell her politely that viewings were last night and the casket is closed now, per the family's request. She says, I'm family. Open it. I start stammering. She says she's the daughter and needs to make sure they didn't put the wrong earrings on her mother. She's adamant. I panic. She's aggressive and crying, and I remember Ron telling me to avoid scenes. So, I crack the lid. Just a bit. Barely 6 inches. She looks in, gasps dramatically, and immediately yells, "Those aren't her earrings. Where are the pearls?" Heads turn. People are watching now. This woman is flipping out, screaming about her mother's favorite pearls, how she specifically told that ghoul Kelsey that the pearls were to be buried with her. That's when my blood goes cold. My brain. Wait. Kelsey? My Kelsey. I lean in. Sorry, did you say Kelsey? She blinks.
Yeah. Kelsey Brannigan.
The mortician. She promised us the pearls were in the casket. I think I blacked out for a second. That's when I realize I've never asked where Kelsey works. Turns out she works here. At this exact funeral home. Ron's niece. Kelsey had the day off. That's why she hadn't seen me around. I'm spiraling. The woman is still yelling about the earrings, people are crying now, and Ron comes storming back in like an angry crypt keeper demanding who opened the casket. I, in the worst decision of my adult life, try to cover. She, forced it open. I didn't open it. She must have pried it. Ron looks at the woman, who is now so offended she looks ready to leap into the casket herself. She denies it, screams that I'm lying, says she watched me open it. Ron turns to me with this look like he's already planning where to store my body. You opened it during a closed casket funeral. Are you insane? I try to explain. I babble about earrings, about trying to help, about not wanting a scene. Then, like the climax of a Shakespearean tragedy, Kelsey walks in. She wasn't supposed to be working, but apparently she stopped by to drop off some paperwork. She walks into a full-blown war zone. Her uncle shouting. Her cousin crying. Me stammering next to a half-open casket. And her dead client's daughter screaming about pearls and betrayal. She sees me and freezes. What the hell are you doing here? Ron turns. You know this idiot? She puts 2 and 2 together. Face bombs. Then sighs the deepest sigh of her life. She walks over, closes the casket gently, and handles the situation like a boss, soothing the daughter, assuring her the earrings will be found, leading her to the side room. Everyone else files out slowly. Ron looks like he wants to throttle me. After everything settles, Kelsey drags me outside. In the rain. Like a funeral home version of The Notebook if it had gone horribly, horribly wrong. I cannot believe you took a job here. Without telling me. I wanted to impress you. By playing corpse intern? We argue. She's furious. Rightfully. Says she's been working for years to be taken seriously in a male-dominated field, and now here I am, crashing her workplace like some kind of grief groupie. I try to explain I meant well, but it just sounds worse the more I talk. She walks off. I get fired. Ron actually says the words, "You're a liability to the dead," which I didn't know could physically hurt until that moment. Later that night, Kelsey texts me. She says she found the earrings. They were in the prep room, in a labeled envelope, exactly where she left them. The daughter had misunderstood the burial schedule. It was never a closed casket funeral. Ron had gotten it wrong. So I wasn't even technically violating protocol, just participating in a disaster. Still, the damage was done. Kelsey and I haven't spoken much since. She said she needs time, and honestly, I get it. I wanted to prove I could handle her world, that I wasn't just another guy who'd get freaked out by death. But instead of showing respect, I bulldozed into something sacred, messed with a grieving family, and tanked her reputation with her own relatives. Moral of the story: if you want to impress someone, don't get a job handling dead bodies behind their back. Just listen. Ask questions. Be present. Also, maybe avoid cracking open a casket unless you really know what you're doing. This happened about a year ago, and I still get weird texts from people I can only describe as spiritually aggressive. At the time, I thought I was just going to a cool wellness retreat with a girl I liked. I left with a shaved head, a new name, and a lot of questions. Buckle up. So for context, I had a massive crush on this girl from work named Emily. She was everything I wasn't: confident, free-spirited, into kombucha and sound baths and talking to plants. I'm more of a microwave my dinner and binge sci-fi alone kind of guy, but she was magnetic. You know the type. Anyway, after weeks of flirting and bonding over shared trauma from our micromanaging boss, she invites me to this weekend retreat she said was life-changing. I thought it was like a yoga thing. She made it sound super chill. Just a few friends, nature, detoxing from the digital world. I figured, okay, maybe I'll do some meditation, hike a bit, and maybe, if the stars align, we'll share a tent or something. I told her I was totally down and love being off the grid sometimes, which was a complete lie. The longest I've been off-grid is when my Wi-Fi went out for 4 hours and I had a minor existential crisis. We drive out Friday morning. It's about 2 hours into the mountains, no cell service, no GPS. I'm already nervous, but she's in the passenger seat talking about transcending the ego and harmonic resonance, and I'm just nodding like an idiot, pretending I get it. We finally pull into this clearing with maybe a dozen cars parked in a circle. There's a big fire pit, lots of people wearing white linen robes, barefoot, smiling in that unnervingly calm way that makes you wonder if they know something you don't. I try to play it cool. They all greet us with hugs that last a little too long. A guy named Cedar, not his birth name, I guarantee it, takes my bag and says, "You won't be needing these burdens here." He means my phone, wallet, and keys. I hesitate, but Emily beams at me and hands hers over, so I do too. In my mind, I'm like, all right, it's a vibe.
Just go with it.
We start with a grounding ceremony where we chant our birth frequencies. I obviously don't know mine, so a woman with a tattoo of Saturn on her forehead does some math based on my birth date and tells me I'm a resonant blue eagle. I don't know what that means, but everyone claps, so I clap too. That night we sit around the fire, drinking some herbal tea that tastes like garden mulch and talking about how capitalism is a parasite. At one point, someone mentions the Great Shedding, and I laugh, thinking it's a joke. It is not. I get a 5-minute death stare from a guy named Solstice. Day 2 gets intense. We're woken up at sunrise by someone playing a didgeridoo. We're told we're going to do a soul unbinding ceremony, which involves screaming into the forest while holding hands. I'm trying to keep an open mind, thinking this is just a wild experience I'll tell my friends about later. Then they bring out the mushrooms. Not cremini. Not shiitake. The kind that make trees breathe and time bend. I've never done anything harder than edibles, but Emily looks at me and says, "Let go. Trust the path." So I take the damn mushrooms. What follows is 8 hours of me becoming one with a rock, crying because I remembered the sound of my childhood dog's bark and briefly believing I was an oak tree named Harold. Someone wrapped me in a blanket and whispered, "You're seen," which made me sob uncontrollably. When I come down, it's dusk, and I'm wearing someone else's robe. Emily is sitting in a circle with the others, eyes closed, humming. I sit down next to her, trying not to freak out. Then the leader, a tall man with silver hair and a third eye tattoo on his chest, starts talking about cleansing our past selves. And then people start shaving their heads, like right there, in the firelight, one by one, chanting something about freedom from the flesh mask. Emily looks at me with tears in her eyes and says, "This is the most honest I've ever felt." Before I can say anything, someone hands her clippers.
She hands them to me.
"Will you do it?" "Reader, I did it." I shaved her head, then mine. I had a panic attack halfway through but disguised it as a spiritual release. They clapped again. That was apparently the final stage of entering the fold. I was then given a necklace made of bones, I didn't ask from what, and told my new name was River Echo. I wanted to leave. Immediately. But I had no idea where we were, no phone, no keys, no Emily. She was already deep in conversation with someone about moving to the commune full-time. So I stayed one more night. At one point I overheard them talking about transcending bodily form and genuinely started wondering if I'd accidentally joined a death cult. At dawn, I found the guy who took our stuff and begged for my keys. I lied and said I had a medical emergency and needed to get to a hospital. He seemed skeptical but handed over my stuff, minus my phone, which they said was ritually buried to sever digital chains. I got in my car and drove until I hit signal. First thing I did was hit up a gas station bathroom, stare at my reflection, and have a full-blown identity crisis. Then I called my best friend to come get me. Emily texted me a few days later. River Echo, we missed your light. The fold is always open. I blocked her. Moral of the story: don't lie to impress a girl. Don't take mysterious tea. And don't trust a man named Cedar. I still have the bone necklace. Sometimes I look at it and wonder how close I came to being reborn as Moon Cricket or whatever. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. This happened last weekend, and I'm still catching flack for it. For context, I, 32M, work in a mid-sized software company. We're one of those startup culture places where half the people wear hoodies and swear by microdosing, and the other half think a team outing is 2 beers and silence. Our CEO, Mark, 45M, is a former finance bro turned tech visionary who's been trying really hard to seem chill for the past year. So last week, HR announces a mandatory company barbecue. A team-building, fun-in-the-sun sort of thing, to boost morale and foster synergy. Read. Awkwardly stand around eating undercooked burgers with people whose names you forget during Zoom calls. But hey, free food and an excuse to bail on Friday meetings?
Count me in.
Now, here's where I come in. I'm one of the few employees with a decent backyard in the area, and since I live like 10 minutes from the office, they asked if I'd be cool with hosting. I said yes, mostly because I was trying to angle for a promotion and figured playing the good sport couldn't hurt. Come Friday, I clean the place up, mow the lawn, set up some fold-out tables, and a Bluetooth speaker. I even get my buddy Derek, who runs a food truck, to help with the grilling. I had one job outside of hosting: bring desserts. Here's where the fuck-up began. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend and I went on a baking spree, experimenting with different edibles. Not the creepy 2010-style weed brownies, but gourmet-style THC-infused lemon bars, cookies, caramels, high-end stuff. We labeled them and stored them in 2 Tupperware containers, one red, regular, one green, edibles. They were clearly labeled, but otherwise identical. You see where this is going. Morning of the barbecue, I'm running late. I grab the red-lidded container from the fridge and throw it in my cooler, along with some beers and sodas. I don't even open it. I swear on all that is holy, I was trying to bring regular lemon bars. Fast forward to about 2 p.m., the party's going well. Derek is flipping burgers, music's playing, people are actually talking. Mark shows up fashionably late, wearing Ray-Bans and a Patagonia vest over a Hawaiian shirt, looking like someone who just watched The Social Network and decided he was Zuck. He's schmoozing, trying to connect with the team, doing that thing where he remembers half a fact about each person and uses it awkwardly. How's the home brewing going, Kevin? Then comes dessert. I set the lemon bars out on a tray, right next to the Esmore stuff and some fruit. About a dozen people grab one, including Mark. I'm chatting with someone when I see him take a bite. I do a mental freeze frame. Red lid. Was it red? It was red, right?
Nope.
I walk over and check the cooler. Red lid. Inside? Regular cookies. That moment was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I sprint back to the table just as Mark is finishing his second lemon bar. The man apparently loves citrus. I try to casually intercept him. Me. Hey Mark, how's the dessert? Mark. Dude, incredible. Did you make these? I'm stealing this recipe. So buttery. I laugh weakly.
Yet about that.
Did they taste a little different? Mark narrows his eyes. Different how? That's when it hits him. His smile fades. His pupils go wide. He sort of sways a little like a drunk guy trying to pretend he's not drunk. I see the exact moment realization dawns, and it's like a curtain gets pulled down in his brain. Mark stares at me and whispers, "Am I high?" I nod. And then he starts laughing. At first it's a chuckle. Then it becomes a full, unhinged cackle. Everyone turns to look as our CEO doubles over, wheezing. He stands up and yells, "You drugged me, BRO," and laughs even harder. And I swear to God, for a moment, I think maybe asterisk, this will be okay. It was not okay. About 10 minutes later, he's lying on a lounge chair with his arms spread like he's sinking into the earth. He keeps muttering stuff like time is a flat circle and what if money is just a metaphor for trust? People start to notice. HR begins circling like vultures. Someone asks if we need to call an ambulance. Derek, who knows exactly what kind of edibles these were, whispers, "He's gonna be real messed up for like 6 hours, bro." Mark tries to stand, realizes he has no legs, metaphorically, I think, then tells my intern that he's transcending the hierarchy of labor and that she should do whatever her soul yearns for. People are taking photos. At some point, he calls his wife and whispers into the phone like he's on a spy mission. I only hear one side of the call. "No, Karen, I'm not drunk. I'm elevated. I've seen the other side, and it's just a bunch of ferns." HR finally pulls me aside, and I come clean. I tell them it was an accident, which it was, and that I feel terrible, which I do. Mark, still horizontal, gives me a thumbs up from the lawn. "Best barbecue ever," he slurs. Eventually, his assistant drives him home. The aftermath? Well, HR had a very long meeting with me on Monday. There were forms. So many forms. I'm not fired because technically it wasn't malicious and Mark vouched for me, kind of. But I've been unofficially dubbed the chef around the office. Mark hasn't come in since. He's working remote for the week. Rumor is, he spent Saturday painting a mural of a lemon bar on his garage door. The funniest part? We got an anonymous feedback survey yesterday about the barbecue. Someone wrote, "Best event so far. Super chill. Desserts were fire. 10 out of 10 would transcend again." TIFU a few days ago, and it has been haunting me ever since. I work at a mid-sized tech startup, around 200 people, hybrid work setup, very Slack-centric, and most communication happens online. I'm a back-end dev, nothing flashy, been here a couple years, and generally keep a low profile. I don't interact with people outside of my immediate team much, and that's exactly how I like it. So earlier this week, I had a full-on mental collapse. Not like a cute, ugh, I need a break kind of thing. This was ugly, snot dripping, can't breathe, panic attack crying. And the kicker? It was all triggered by a tuna sandwich. I had a brutal morning full of back-to-back meetings, production bugs, and our lead PM breathing down my neck over a deadline that wasn't even mine. I was hangry, sleep-deprived, and stressed beyond reason. Around 1 p.m., I finally took a break and went to the fridge for the tuna sandwich I had specifically made the night before. It was gone. Just gone. Only a passive-aggressive sticky note that read, "Don't leave your food unlabeled, smiley face," in mocking pink Sharpie. Reader, I broke. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor and just sobbed, like a child who dropped their ice cream cone. I knew it wasn't just about the sandwich, it was a symbol. The last thread of my sanity, and someone devoured it with glee and left a note. My brain short-circuited. I felt powerless, invisible, and disrespected. So, like any rational adult, I recorded a voice message on my phone to send to my best friend, part vent, part cry for help. The message was 1 minute and 47 seconds of unintelligible sobbing, half sentences like, "I can't do this anymore. Why would someone take it?" And it had Dijon, Clara, Dija.
Followed by more sobbing.
I ended the recording, feeling mildly better just having gotten it out. Now here's where the apocalyptic level screw-up happens. I open WhatsApp, which is where my best friend and I usually chat. Except That morning I had responded to a company-wide voice message request for birthday greetings to our CEO. We were supposed to record a cheerful clip saying, "Happy birthday, Alex," or something similar. HR had made a group chat called CEO B-Day Voice Notes. I had never muted or left the group because I figured I'd do it and forget about it. Well, when I opened WhatsApp, guess what conversation was at the top? Yep. CEO B-Day Voice Notes. And in my over-emotional haze, I hit send without checking. Sent the whole crying, sandwich morning, existential breakdown voice note to the entire company. I didn't realize it until about 10 minutes later, when my phone buzzed with a message from someone in marketing that just said, "Are you okay?" I opened WhatsApp again and saw it. That damned gray checkmark. Then two. Then played. I clicked into the group and saw my voice note sitting right there under all the "Happy Birthday, Alex" ones standing out like a sore, sobbing thumb. Panic set in fast. I tried deleting it, but by then the damage was done. At least 20 people had seen it already, including HR, our CEO, and, God help me, Clara, who I'm now convinced stole my sandwich based on the note and the fact that she hasn't looked me in the eye since. Slack exploded with DMs. Some people were genuinely concerned. Others thought it was a weird bit. One guy from data science thought I was starting some kind of anti-work performance art protest. Our CTO apparently had to call HR because there was an incident involving distressing employee content. Worst of all, the CEO sent a message in the voice note group saying, "Whoever sent that last one, I hope you're all right. Remember that our mental health resources are always available." So now, not only do I look unhinged, but my emotional collapse is forever immortalized in the same chat as Becky from finance screaming, "Happy birthday" from the Phoenix office, while holding her cat. The aftermath was a mix of horror and weird support. HR reached out and asked if I wanted to take a few mental health days. I said yes, mostly to hide. My manager was surprisingly cool about it. She even said something like, "I've had a meltdown over missing lunch before, too." So that was comforting, I guess. But the memes. Oh, the memes. My coworkers are monsters. Someone auto-tuned my voice note into a tragic lo-fi track. Another person printed out fake motivational posters with a quote from my breakdown. It had Dijon, Clara. Dijon. They put one on the kitchen fridge. I died a little inside when I saw it. I've officially become that guy. The tuna meltdown guy. It's even worse because I've always prided myself on being low drama, calm, emotionally reserved. But nope. Now everyone in the company knows what I sound like when I ugly cry about condiments. I'm back at work now, trying to keep a low profile, but people keep walking by my desk dropping off tuna sandwiches as a joke, or asking if I want to start a Dijon fan club. I smile. I laugh. I die inside a little more each time. Anyway, moral of the story. Always double-check your recipient before sending a voice note, label your food, and never underestimate the emotional devastation of a stolen sandwich when you're already at your limit. TIFU by accidentally getting my boss arrested on an international business trip and then making it way worse. A few weeks ago, my company sent me and my boss, Tom, not his real name, to Munich for a huge trade conference. Tom is the VP of sales, a mid-40s guy who's been at the company forever, and I'm just a mid-level manager trying to not screw up this once-in-a-lifetime trip. I had one job: support Tom, take notes, be helpful, don't embarrass myself or the company. Everything started out great. We arrived early, had some good bratwurst and beer, and prepped for the conference. Tom was in great spirits, even let me expense a couple dinners. On the third night, after a long day of meetings, Tom suggested we go out for a real Munich experience, meaning a late dinner and some bar hopping. We ended up at this old-school Bavarian pub where they serve liter-sized beers, and the waitresses wear dirndls. Tom got pretty lit, but still functional. I was pacing myself, aware that I'd have to keep him alive. He got chatty with the bartender, started tossing out terrible German phrases, and somehow convinced this bartender to give him a special souvenir, a metal stein with the pub's crest on it. I thought it was a bit weird, but didn't say anything. We stumbled back to the hotel, Tom triumphantly holding his gift, and I figured that was that. The next morning, things spiraled. We're walking into the convention center when 3 German police officers come out of nowhere and stop us. Tom jokes with them until one of them holds up a photo. It's a CCTV image of him stuffing that metal stein under his coat. I realize with dawning horror that Tom didn't get a gift. He straight up stole the stein. Drunk or not, it was theft. They arrested him on the spot. I tried explaining it was a misunderstanding, but they weren't having it. Tom looked mortified. I called the U.S. consulate like some panicked intern, and they told me to stay calm and let the legal process happen, but that they'd get involved. So now I'm alone at this massive conference, fielding questions from our clients like, "Where's Tom?" and trying not to fall apart. That night, I went back to the pub to try and apologize or pay for the stein. The bartender, who remembered us clearly, said Tom had been warned not to take it, and that she even chased after him, but he waved and kept going. She had no intention of pressing charges until he lied to the cops about it being a gift. Apparently, that pissed her off. I offered to pay generously. She declined. Feeling guilty and panicked, I tried to smooth things over by writing an apology letter in German using Google Translate, hoping it would make things better. I dropped it off at the police station. Big mistake. Turns out Google Translate isn't exactly precise, and what I thought said, "Please forgive my boss, he made a mistake," actually said something like, "Please ignore my boss's crime, we can pay you off." I essentially admitted to attempted bribery in a formal statement. Next day, I get a call from the consulate saying things are now worse. Much worse. They ask if I've been in contact with the police, and when I say yes and explain, there's a long pause, then a guy says, "Sir, we advise you to stop interacting with local authorities." Now I'm under suspicion. The police come to the hotel and invite me to answer questions. I panic again and tell them I need a lawyer. That's when I find out that the company doesn't provide legal aid abroad for non-executive staff. Tom?
Covered. Me?
Not so much. I call my personal lawyer back home, who is mostly a real estate guy, and he freaks out. "Don't sign anything. Don't say anything. Get a German lawyer immediately." It takes 2 days to find one. In the meantime, my keycard stops working at the hotel. I go to the desk, and the receptionist tells me, with visible pity, that the reservation has been adjusted and I'll need to make other arrangements. Turns out our company, in damage control mode, is distancing themselves from me. Now I'm in a cheap hostel, dodging calls from corporate HR, and Tom is still in custody. The only person who believes me is a junior marketing guy back home who Venmo'd me money for food. Eventually, Tom gets released after a week. Charges were dropped after he apologized in person and paid restitution, but he's furious at me. When we finally meet up before the flight, he doesn't say a word to me until we're in the cab to the airport. Then he drops, "You wrote a letter to the police using Google Translate?" I nod. He closes his eyes. "You basically offered them a bribe." I try to explain, but he cuts me off. "You realize if you were any higher up in the company, we'd both be screwed right now? You almost escalated a minor theft into an international incident." The flight was tense. Back home, HR pulls me into a meeting. I think I'm done for. But to my surprise, they just want to hear my side of the story and document everything. I give them the full rundown, minus the exact wording of the Google Translate debacle, and they thank me for handling a difficult situation with integrity.
What?
Then I find out that the company is quietly reassigning Tom to a non-client-facing role. The incident apparently triggered some deeper concerns from leadership. So, I somehow survived. But now I'm the guy in the office who got Tom arrested in Germany, and there are Stein jokes every other day. I've received no fewer than 6 novelty beer mugs in my mailbox. One of them had a note that said, "Hope this one's legal." I don't think I'll be traveling for work anytime soon. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult while trying to impress a girl. It started innocently enough. I was 24, single, and painfully average in most ways except one. I had an insane ability to make terrible decisions when women were involved. One night, I went to a low-key poetry reading because a friend told me there'd be hot, artsy girls with self-esteem issues. I figured that was my shot. Enter Lila. Piercings, bangs, leather jacket, and Doc Martens that probably cost more than my rent. She read a poem called Capitalism Ate My Dog, and I fell in love on the spot. Afterward, I struck up a conversation, managing to fumble my way into her good graces by pretending to care deeply about post-industrial ecofeminism. Don't Google it, I still don't know what it is. She mentioned a gathering happening that weekend in the woods. Her exact words, "It's like a spiritual retreat meets performance art, but underground. Super raw, very anti-establishment. You'd love it." Spoiler, I would not love it.
Cut to Friday.
I told my roommate I'd be gone for the weekend. He said, "Try not to get murdered." I laughed because he always joked like that. I wouldn't be laughing later. We drove 3 hours out of the city in her beat-up Volvo that smelled like sage and regret. We got to this clearing in the woods lit by torches and full of people in earth-tone robes. Like, matching robes. There were tents, incense, and a suspiciously large number of bongo drums. It screamed Burning Man for people who got banned from Burning Man. I thought, okay, maybe it's like a hippie rave thing. But the first sign that this wasn't your standard weekend getaway was the guy who greeted us by bowing and saying, "Welcome to the fold of Onari. Shed your name, shed your shame." I laughed, thinking it was performance art. No one else laughed. Lila leaned in and whispered, "Just go with it. It's part of the experience." I nodded, trying to seem cool while wondering if I'd just joined a cult. A tall man with waist-length hair and the most powerful unibrow I've ever seen emerged from the biggest tent. Everyone called him Father Gleam. I tried not to visibly recoil when he kissed Lila on the forehead and murmured, "Your energy hums today."
He turned to me.
"And this new soul? This is Rain." Lila gave me a look. I realized she was giving me a new name. I panicked and said, "Yeah,
Rain."
short for Rainbow. Father Gleam closed his eyes and said, "Yes, I feel the spectrum in you." Which, in hindsight, is exactly what someone named Father Gleam would say. What followed were 2 days of nonstop insanity. We meditated for hours. We danced barefoot on dirt. We released our anchors by screaming our traumas into jars. I didn't have any real trauma prepared, so I screamed about how I once got banned from Chipotle for trying to use expired coupons. They said it counted. Meals were raw vegetables and something called sun broth, which tasted like sadness and wet bark. We weren't allowed to say our real names, use electronics, or question Father Gleam. I tried once, asked why we weren't allowed to use flashlights. His response, "Electricity is the leash of the corporate serpent."
Right.
Then came the night of merging. I thought it was going to be like a big group cuddle and some group chants.
Nope.
They passed around something called Mother's Breath, which smelled suspiciously like fermented goat pee and moonshine, and things got intimate. Clothes came off. People painted each other with mud and ash. Drums pounded. There was moaning. Lots of moaning. I looked at Lila, expecting her to be as freaked out as I was. She was fully into it, smearing someone's blood, I hope it was fake, across her chest while howling at the moon. Meanwhile, I stood there awkwardly in my boxer briefs holding a stick someone handed me, trying not to make eye contact with a naked man named Cricket. That's when I decided to leave. Problem was, I didn't have my phone, my clothes were in Lila's tent, and I had no idea where we were. I wandered into the woods hoping to find the road. Instead, I found a guy named Elm who said he'd guide me back for a lock of my hair. I was desperate, so I let him cut a chunk, and he tucked it into a pouch with what looked like teeth. After 2 hours of hiking, we hit a dirt road. I convinced a passing hunter to give me a ride by saying I was an actor researching a role and got too into it. He nodded like that made sense, dropped me at the nearest gas station, and gave me a beef jerky stick. I have never loved a stranger more. I called my roommate Collect. He answered with, "Did you die?"
Close.
He drove out to get me, laughing so hard he had to pull over twice. When we got home, I slept for 16 hours and woke up to 23 missed texts from Lila. She said I broke the sacred trust of the spiral and that I was emotionally colonizing the fold. I have no idea what any of that means, but I blocked her and saged my apartment just in case. Anyway, Now I can't go near any poetry readings without twitching. I have a weird bald patch on the back of my head, and to this day, my roommate calls me Rainbow. Moral of the story: if a girl in Doc Martens invites you to the woods, make sure you bring your own car, your own snacks, and a healthy skepticism for anything involving ash and nudity. TIFU by crashing my own wedding because I thought it would be funny to make a surprise entrance. Let me preface this by saying, I'm not usually a dramatic person. I'm the quiet guy at work, the chill friend, the one who listens more than he talks. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that my wedding day was the perfect time to reinvent myself as the guy who pulls off elaborate stunts. Specifically, I decided to crash my own wedding. Not figuratively, like getting cold feet or something, but literally stage a fake delay, disappear, and then make a grand entrance mid-ceremony.
Why?
I thought it'd be funny. A memory. A story people would tell for years. Well, they will tell it for years, but not in the way I hoped. The plan started taking shape 2 months before the wedding. I told my best man, Ryan, that I wanted to do something big. Like what? He asked. I don't know, I said. What if I'm missing when it starts, and then I ride in on a motorcycle or something? He looked at me like I was joking. When I didn't laugh, he just muttered, All right, your funeral. In hindsight, I should have taken that as a warning. We even rehearsed it. Well, kind of. I told the officiant, a mutual friend, Jesse, that we'd be doing a thing, but I didn't give him the details because I wanted genuine reactions. I told my fiancée, Leah, that I had a small surprise for her during the ceremony. She looked suspicious, but I reassured her it was something sweet. No jokes, she asked. Nothing like that speech you gave at my sister's wedding where you talked about her feral college years? I promised. The venue was this gorgeous botanical garden outside of town. The plan was, everyone would be seated, the ceremony would start, Jesse would go through the intro, and then when it was my cue to walk out, I'd be missing. Murmurs. Confusion. Then, boom, motorcycle engine in the distance. I roll in, hop off, toss the helmet, kiss my bride, and we go on like normal. Memorable, right? So the day comes. Ryan helps me stash the bike in a side path leading to the garden. Everything's going smoothly. I'm in my tux, we're in position. Ryan heads off to take his seat. I wait in the trees, engine running, helmet on, adrenaline spiking like I'm about to rob a bank. Cue the music. I can faintly hear Jesse starting. I wait for my cue. Then I hear him say my name. Silence. The murmurs start. I give it another 10 seconds, then rev the engine. Showtime. What I didn't account for was that the gravel path was a bit narrower than I remembered. I take off, too fast, too confident. A root juts out, wham, front tire hits it wrong, and I lose control. The bike fishtails, I overcorrect, and suddenly I'm airborne. I have a vivid, slow-motion view of 100 guests turning toward the sound, just in time to see the groom come flying off a motorcycle like a goddamn Michael Bay stunt double. I hit a row of folding chairs and tumbled through them like bowling pins, landing hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I'm seeing stars. Someone's screaming. I hear glass shatter. Probably the champagne setup. I sit up, dazed, and realize my helmet is cracked. My tux is torn. One shoe's missing, and there's a bleeding gash on my cheek. A kid is crying. Someone's yelling, Call 911. Leah is running toward me, face a blend of horror and fury. I try to laugh it off. Surprise? I croak. Bad move. Leah loses it. And I mean loses it. She starts screaming, not even words at first, just pure rage sounds. Then the words come. Are you insane? You could have died. What the hell is wrong with you? Jesse tries to intervene. Ryan is frozen, looking like he just watched me kill someone. My mom is in tears. Her boyfriend is filming it for some reason. The paramedics show up. They make me lie down and put a neck brace on, just in case. Leah is pacing, talking to her sister in rapid, furious whispers. Eventually, someone brings me a bottle of water, and I hear Leah say, We're postponing. I'm not marrying him today. That stung more than the crash. I ended up with a mild concussion, a dislocated shoulder, and some road rash on my leg. Spent the night in the ER. Ryan stayed with me. He didn't say much, just occasionally muttered, "You absolute dumbass," while scrolling Reddit. Leah didn't respond to my texts for 3 days. When she finally did, it was a long message that started with, "I don't even know where to start," and ended with, "We need to talk about what marriage means to you." We're still together and therapy is involved. The wedding has been rescheduled, smaller, more private, no surprises. My mom won't let me forget it. Every family dinner since has included some variation of "Remember when Jason turned his wedding into a Monster Jam event?" The video, of course, went viral. Her cousin uploaded it with a caption, "When your fiancé thinks he's James Bond, but he's actually Mr. Bean." Millions of views. A meme page gave me a fake award, Most Extra Entrance of the Year.
So yeah,
I tried to make a legendary entrance. Instead, I created a cautionary tale for future grooms everywhere. On the plus side, the crash broke enough chairs that the venue refunded part of our deposit.
so there's that.
It all started last Saturday when I matched with a girl on Tinder named Cassie. Her profile was full of cute pictures with dogs, travel shots in Thailand, and a quirky bio that said, "I collect weird mugs and know how to make 17 kinds of pasta." Basically, it screamed not a serial killer, and that's all I really ask these days. We chatted for a bit, the conversation flowed well, and eventually she invited me to a chill little gathering with some of her friends that evening. She said it was low-key, just snacks, wine, and good vibes. I figured, why not? Beats awkward coffee shop small talk. She texted me an address that wasn't too far from my apartment, in this older residential neighborhood I'd never really explored. When I pulled up, the house looked normal. Maybe a little too normal. Think freshly mowed lawn, wind chimes, one of those wooden live, laugh, love signs on the porch. The door opened before I even knocked, and there stood Cassie in a flowing white linen dress, barefoot. Not exactly your typical Netflix and chill attire, but I rolled with it. She greeted me with a long hug. Not like a casual, "Hey, good to see you" hug. This one lingered. She also whispered, "Your energy feels right" into my ear, which I laughed at because I thought she was joking. Spoiler: she was not joking. Inside, the house was dimly lit with candles and smelled like sage and lavender. Around a dozen people milled about, all dressed in similar flowy, off-white clothes. Some wore beaded necklaces. One dude was playing a sitar in the corner. A woman was painting what I think was a dolphin giving birth in space. I started to realize this wasn't just a wine night. Cassie led me to a cushion on the floor and offered me something she called spirit tea. I asked what was in it, and she just smiled and said, "Only what your soul is ready for." I pretended to sip it, but didn't actually drink because I watch documentaries and I know how this **tea goes. We sat in a circle, and the guy with the sitar, whose name was either Sunbeam or Nathan, it wasn't clear, stood up and announced, "Welcome, new light. Tonight, we cleanse the ego and awaken the womb of truth." Everyone clapped. I clapped. Out of fear. What followed was 2 hours of guided soul-shedding, which included deep breathing, chanting something about moons, and sharing your core wound with the group. A guy named Owl said his core wound was being born during a Mercury retrograde. A woman named Luna sobbed while talking about how her cat was the reincarnation of her grandma. When it got to me, I panicked and said my core wound was that my parents never let me have Lunchables as a kid. There was a beat of silence. Then Sunbeam/Nathan said, "That's heavy, brother." And everyone nodded like I just revealed I watched my village burn. Then things escalated. They brought out a large wooden bowl filled with a grayish sludge. Cassie whispered, "This is the sacred root. It helps release trauma through the body." Again, I faked a sip. I was seriously considering bolting at this point, but I was stuck between two people deep in a shared trance, and I didn't want to break the circle. The sludge clearly hit everyone fast. Some were giggling, some were crying. One guy was doing cartwheels in the backyard while screaming, "I am the lizard." Cassie started humming and rubbing my shoulders, asking me if I felt my chakras opening. I said I wasn't sure, but my lower back hurt. She said that meant my root chakra was stubborn. At this point, I decided I needed to leave. I tried to stand, but immediately someone took my hand and said, Not yet. You haven't released your karmic residue. I told them I left my karmic residue in my car and needed to check on it. Cassie frowned and asked if I was resisting my awakening. I said no, I just had to poop. That seemed to work. I made it to the front door, but not before stepping over a woman who was apparently rebirthing herself on the doormat. I got outside and started walking fast. I didn't want to risk waiting for an Uber right outside, so I hoofed it a few blocks until I could order one in peace. Cassie texted me later that night saying she could feel my aura detaching from the group and that it was painful to witness. She invited me back next week for deeper integration. I told her I appreciated the invite, but my aura was actually allergic to sage and would be taking some space to heal.
So, yeah.
TIFU by going on what I thought was a casual Tinder date and instead joining and fleeing from what I'm 87% sure was a very relaxed cult. I still don't know what was in the spirit tea, but part of me wants to drink it just to find out if I also have a womb of truth. So this happened a couple of weeks ago, and the social fallout is still burning hotter than my shame. It all started when my landlord offered me a sweet deal on the lower unit of a duplex he'd recently inherited from his uncle. The place was old, a little beat up, but spacious and dirt cheap for the area. I moved in that weekend with my dog, Pepper, a very excitable golden retriever with an instinct to be overly friendly to everything, including bees, lawnmowers, and skunks. The upper unit was already rented to a guy named Kyle. Mid-30s, super chill, big beard. Always smelled vaguely like a combination of sage and old wood. We had a few friendly interactions, waving in the driveway, small talk about trash days, that kind of thing, but mostly kept to ourselves. He seemed cool. Now, the backyard situation was strange. The lot was fenced in with a high wooden fence, and the yard was technically shared, but Kyle made it very clear that he handled all the gardening and asked me not to touch anything or move stuff around. I didn't care. I'm not a yard work guy. I had a tiny grill and a couple of lawn chairs and was content to let the rest be wild. Fast forward 2 weeks and Pepper gets a case of the zoom eyes while we're out in the backyard. She does this figure-8 NASCAR thing until she tears through a section of the back corner and suddenly crashes into a stack of what looked like wooden pallets stacked in a weird triangle shape. Behind that was a locked wooden structure like a tiny tool shed, only way too well built, and with a little solar panel on top. I checked to see if she was okay, she was, but I also couldn't help but notice that the pallets had been hiding a sort of makeshift ventilation setup. My curiosity overruled my judgment. I walked up to the shed and, with a little guilt, peeked inside through a crack.
Holy shit.
Inside was the most professional-looking hydroponic grow system I've ever seen outside of YouTube. Neatly organized rows of LED lights, fans, climate control, the works. And the plants? A forest of tall, healthy marijuana plants. Dozens of them. It was like walking in on a weed Narnia. It clicked instantly. Kyle wasn't just a hobbyist. This was a full-on operation. He'd basically built a secret grow house in our backyard. Now here's where I really messed up. See, I'm not anti-weed. Not at all. But I am kind of dumb when it comes to electrical stuff. I noticed one of the fans was hanging loose, wobbling wildly, and making this buzzing noise. I thought, I'll just be a good neighbor and tighten it or something. So I grabbed a metal rake that was nearby and gently poked at it, trying to nudge it back into place. Turns out the fan's casing was damaged and exposed some wires. The metal rake made contact. There was a huge pop, a flash of light, and then dead silence. For half a second. Then, the smell of burning plastic and this ominous crackling sound. Smoke started pouring out of the shed. I panicked and yanked Pepper back, ran to grab the garden hose, but by the time I got it untangled and turned on, the little shed was already fully engulfed in flames. The solar panel on top sparked violently and exploded like a bad action movie. Neighbors started screaming. Someone called 911. The fire spread to the nearby fence and a couple of overhanging tree limbs. It was chaos. Firefighters showed up, doused the whole thing, and asked a lot of questions. I tried to explain what happened without directly saying illegal grow op, but it was obvious they figured it out fast. Kyle arrived mid-interrogation, still in his pajamas, and completely lost his mind when he saw the remains of his garden. He started yelling, sobbing, threatening to sue, then flipped and started trying to convince the firefighters that I was some kind of narc trying to sabotage his botanical project. Things only got worse. The police came because the fire had technically damaged neighboring property and someone mentioned hearing a boom. The smell made everything obvious. Kyle tried to spin it as a medical grow, but he didn't have any permits. They confiscated what little was left of his setup. No arrests, but he got a hefty citation and a visit from the city inspector, which apparently led to him being evicted for unauthorized modifications to the property. Here's the kicker. I thought that would be the end of it. But Kyle didn't leave quietly. Oh no. For the past 2 weeks, I've been the target of a bizarre, petty revenge campaign. First, all my Amazon packages started going missing. Then my car was egged 3 days in a row. I found actual human poop in my mailbox, still trying not to think too hard about that one. Someone keeps calling my phone at 3 a.m. and whispering weed facts before hanging up. One time it was just cannabis has over 113 cannabinoids, sleep tight. I've been to the police, but they basically said there's no proof it's him, even though come on. Kyle's friends, who I'm guessing are his fellow growers or just stoner loyalists, have been loitering near my place, giving me the death stare every time I leave. One even dropped a bunch of oregano and lighters on my welcome mat like some kind of drug-themed hex. The landlord is furious. Not at me, thankfully. He says he had no idea what Kyle was doing, but he's threatening to tear up the backyard and install security cameras. Pepper's been stressed. I've been stressed. And now the HUA is sending me nasty letters because unauthorized burning and cultivation of contraband are apparently both my responsibility now.
So yeah,
I accidentally blew up a drug farm, caused my neighbor to get evicted, and started an underground weed war in my quiet suburban neighborhood. All because I thought I could fix a fan with a rake. God help me if this escalates further. I'm already nervous about opening my mailbox every day. So this happened last week, and I've been trying to piece my life back together since. For context, I, 29M, work as an executive assistant to a very, very rich CEO. Let's call him Carl. Carl is the kind of rich where his dogs have therapists and his refrigerator tells you the weather in Tokyo. I've worked for him for about a year, and despite being intimidating as hell, he's always treated me well. So when he asked me to house sit while he and his wife went to Milan for some kind of fancy wellness retreat, I said yes faster than I've ever said anything in my life. His house is not a house. It's a mansion. Not just a mansion. A Bond villain level lair built into the side of a hill with glass walls, a koi pond with imported Japanese carp, a wine cellar that smells like God's basement, and a pool that plays music underwater. It's the kind of place that makes you feel guilty for existing in it. Still, I saw this as a perfect opportunity to live out a week of being fake rich while feeding some cats and watering plants.
easy.
Carl gave me a 10-minute walkthrough before leaving. I nodded the entire time, trying to look like I understood phrases like, don't let the pH balance in the koi pond drop below 6.8, and don't touch the black urn in the meditation room. I assumed most of these warnings were rich people quirks. The first few days went fine. I worked remotely, explored the house, ate from his fully stocked kitchen. Seriously, the man has truffle hummus, and took some very pretentious selfies in front of his modern art collection. But things started going south on Wednesday. It started with the koi pond. I'd been instructed to toss in a small pinch of this very expensive-looking food every morning. But that day, the fish didn't eat. They just hovered there, looking lethargic. I panicked. I Googled koi fish not moving and found a rabbit hole of articles. I tested the water with the little kit he left like I was some kind of aquatic chemist and discovered the pH was at 5.4. Bad. Very bad. So what do? I freak out and add baking soda like the internet said. Except I may have misread the dosage and dumped in way too much. The pond started fizzing like I dropped a Mentos in Coke, and the fish started flailing. I panicked and tried to scoop some of them into a bucket of tap water, which I later learned was also a mistake, but 3 of the fish died. I just sat there holding a koi corpse thinking, this one fish probably cost more than my car. I messaged Carl something vague like, hey, Notice the fish are a little off, might get a pro to take a look. And he just thumbs-upped it.
Cool.
Crisis contained. That night, I needed wine. I went to the cellar to find something cheap. Except there was no cheap wine. The cheapest bottle I could find was from 1992 and had a label written in what I think was French. I figured, well, it's already open and he won't notice one bottle missing. I poured myself a glass and sat in the meditation room because I thought, hey vibes. That's when I noticed the urn. The infamous black urn I was specifically told not to touch. It wasn't ominous looking, it just looked like fancy decor. But of course, wine plus curiosity plus me equals bad decisions. I didn't open it.
I swear.
I just touched it. Lightly. And then I knocked it over. It didn't break, but the lid popped off and this weird ash-smelling dust spilled onto the tatami mat. My brain froze. Did I just spill someone's ashes? Was it a pet? A parent? An ancient warlord? In a blind panic, I tried to sweep the ashes back in with my hands. I sneezed, and some of the dust flew into my face. I may have inhaled someone's grandpa. I duct taped the lid shut and pretended nothing happened. The next day, things got weirder. Doors started opening on their own. Lights flickered. One of the cats, a majestic Maine Coon named Da Vinci, stared at a corner of the room and hissed for like 5 solid minutes. The smart home system kept glitching. Music started randomly playing at 3 a.m. One night, it played Gregorian chants. I stopped sleeping well. I kept hearing whispers. At one point, I thought I saw someone standing in the hallway mirror. I started genuinely considering that maybe I angered a spirit. Maybe Carl's urn wasn't just decorative, and now I'm cursed. Then came the final blow. On the last day, Carl and his wife came home early. I was in the middle of trying to net a 4th dead koi out of the pond when they walked in. His wife, who I hadn't met before, walks right over to the meditation room. I hear her gasp. Then she screams. Apparently, the urn contained the ashes of her ex-husband. I don't know the full story, but I gathered that she kept it in there to remind herself of peace or closure or some rich people's spiritual thing.
She was not happy about the duct tape.
Carl was surprisingly calm about the fish. But the urn? The ashes? He looked at me like he was deciding whether to fire me or bury me in the koi pond. It gets worse. Later that evening, Carl's wife packed a bag and left. Turns out the meditation room and that urn were a serious point of contention in their marriage. She accused Carl of not protecting the energy of the space and disrespecting her past. Carl accused her of being melodramatic. She accused him of hiring an idiot to house sit who vapes and wears Crocs indoors. I don't vape. The Crocs accusation is fair. They had a screaming match in the foyer while I sat on a $40,000 leather chair, holding a dead koi in a net.
I thought that was the end of my job.
And maybe my life. But the next morning, Carl sat me down. He actually apologized for leaving me with such a loaded task and admitted he should have given more context. Apparently, I'm not the first assistant to have issues in that house. One guy once flooded the wine cellar trying to take a hot tub selfie. Another let a falcon inside. Long story, I guess. He gave me a week off and a bonus for emotional trauma. But the koi are gone. The urn is now stored in some temple in Kyoto. And Carl's wife. She filed for separation 3 days later. So yeah, TIFU by trying to be helpful, killing elite fish, inhaling sacred ashes, possibly getting haunted, and accidentally detonating a marriage like a human grenade. On the plus side, I did find out that truffle hummus slaps. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.